Imagine waking up tomorrow and not needing anyone to approve of you. Not your friends, not your boss, not even the people who once made you doubt your worth. Imagine the freedom of walking through your life with your head high, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you know exactly who you are and what you stand for. You don't bend your voice to fit the room. You don't swallow your truth just to keep the peace. You speak with clarity, act with purpose, and walk with integrity, even if no one notices. Especially if no one notices. But let me ask you something real. How much of your life has been shaped by the fear of not being liked? How many times have you traded your peace just to avoid disappointing someone else? We don't always see it happening because the world teaches us early that to belong we have to please. To be loved, we have to perform. But at some point, we stop living our lives and start auditioning for them. The Stoics warned us about this. Real growth begins the moment you stop letting public opinion shape your private decisions. That's what this video is about. The moment you stop chasing approval and start earning real respect, not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that's built in silence, under pressure, through boundaries, and with truth. And if you're ready to stop performing and start becoming, then consider subscribing. Because every small step you take toward living with clarity and principle is a step away from noise and a step toward a life you can actually stand behind. Have you ever said yes when everything inside you whispered no? Not out of desire, not out of alignment, but because the thought of disappointing someone made your chest tighten? It happens so quietly, doesn't it? You agree to go along. You nod. You smile. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. That being flexible makes you a good person. That being liked means you're doing something right. But the truth underneath is heavier than it looks. Because every time you silence your no, you bury a part of your truth. And it doesn't disappear. It waits. Approval feels safe, like a soft place to land. But it isn't peace. It's permission. And permission always has a price. That price is subtle. It's not just time lost or energy drained. It's identity diluted. You begin to forget where you end and others begin. You confuse accommodation with integrity. You tell yourself it's compassion, that it's better to keep the peace than to stir conflict. But what if that peace is a lie? What if it's not peace at all, but submission dressed in gentle language? You can't build a solid life while walking on eggshells. At first, it doesn't seem like much. A small compromise here. A little silence there. A few edits to your opinion. You're being nice. You're being easy to work with. You're avoiding drama. But slowly, quietly, you become a version of yourself that no longer feels like you. And that's when the real discomfort begins. Not from the outside, but from within. Because no matter how much applause you earn, there's a voice inside that knows this isn't the real you. And that voice doesn't stop. It grows louder in the quiet moments. It shows up when you're alone, when the clapping has stopped and the masks come off. It reminds you of everything you've traded just to be accepted. And here's the thing no one tells you. People-pleasing doesn't even guarantee peace. You can be agreeable, polite, thoughtful, and still be disliked. You can shrink yourself down to fit into someone else's comfort zone and they might still walk away. Because approval isn't love. Approval isn't truth. Approval is conditional. It changes with moods, with perceptions, with misunderstandings. Respect, on the other hand, is something else entirely. Respect is not always comfortable, but it's stable. It's not earned through agreement. It's earned through alignment. But let's be honest, it's hard to let go of the need to be liked. It's hard because approval often looks like love and rejection often feels like abandonment, especially if you grew up believing that being accepted meant being safe. So you learned to perform, to read the room, to say the right thing, to avoid friction. You became a master of emotional diplomacy. But inside, you started to disappear. Because when your voice is shaped more by others' comfort than your own convictions, your identity becomes hollow. As the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. And what's worse, it's addictive. Approval can feel like a drug. Every compliment becomes a hit of validation. Every like, every nod, every kind word feeds the illusion that you're okay, until someone disapproves and it all comes crashing down. You start chasing it, adjusting yourself to get it again. You start asking, what should I say to be accepted? How should I act to avoid conflict? But these questions lead you away from yourself. They replace truth with strategy, presence with performance. There's a moment in every person's life when they realize the applause they've been chasing doesn't mean what they thought it did. It's fleeting, it's fickle, and it's often given in exchange for conformity, not authenticity. And in that moment, if you're brave, you begin to ask a new question. Who am I without the performance? What would it look like to stop chasing approval and start standing in truth? Epictetus said, if you want to be free, then learn to live without the admiration of others. That's the core of freedom. Not doing whatever you want, but being rooted enough in yourself that you don't need others to tell you who you are. Of course, letting go of approval doesn't mean becoming careless or cruel. It doesn't mean rejecting others just to prove a point. It means living from a place of principle rather than pressure. It means knowing your values and letting them guide your actions, not the latest opinion or passing emotion. It means having the courage to be disliked for the right reasons rather than being liked for the wrong ones. That's not rebellion. That's responsibility. And it's not easy because people will question you. They'll say you've changed. They'll accuse you of being selfish. But that's only because they've grown comfortable with the version of you that served their needs, not yours. When you stop performing, people who benefited from the act will feel threatened. That's okay. Their discomfort isn't your failure. It's part of the process. Real respect is quiet. It's not flashy. It often comes after the noise dies down and the boundaries are clear. But here's the beauty of it. When you stop needing approval, the relationships that remain are rooted in something far deeper. Mutual understanding, honesty, and trust. You stop wasting energy on proving yourself and start investing in being yourself. And that changes everything. You make decisions faster. You speak more clearly. You walk with more calm. Not because life gets easier, but because you've stopped editing yourself for every room you walk into. There's a strength that grows in silence, in saying no without guilt, in speaking your mind without apology. That strength doesn't come from fighting others. It comes from not fighting yourself. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, no amount of approval can replace it. You begin to feel what real power is. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that doesn't waver. The kind that listens, thinks, and chooses, not out of fear, but out of alignment. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But it's also the most liberating because once you do, you realize something profound. The world doesn't need your performance. It needs your presence. It doesn't need another agreeable echo. It needs your grounded truth. Even if it's quiet, even if it's not always understood, even if it stands alone. You weren't born to fit in. You were born to stand firm, to live with purpose, to act with integrity, and to build a life that doesn't depend on applause to feel worthy." So the next time you feel that pull, the pull to shrink, to soften, to be liked, pause and ask yourself, what am I trading for this approval? And is it worth it? Because the truth is, nothing feels more like home than being yourself. And once you build that home, you won't need to seek shelter in anyone else's approval ever again. You try so hard to be what you think they'll accept. You shift your tone. You soften your opinions. You become easier to be around. You adjust and filter and accommodate, hoping it will earn you a place in someone's world. You tell yourself it's compromise, that it's maturity, that it's love. But deep down, a quiet voice keeps asking, if they like this version of me, do they even know me at all? It's a painful question because it forces you to confront something few people want to face. Sometimes even your best performance doesn't get you the role. Even when you try to be exactly what someone seems to want, gentle, low maintenance, agreeable, they can still walk away. And that doesn't just sting. It cuts in a different way because it's not just rejection. It's the realization that you weren't even showing your full self and it still wasn't enough. What you feel in that moment isn't just heartbreak. It's exposure. You're left wondering if maybe you should have shown more of yourself, or less, or something different altogether. The rejection hits the version of you that was carefully edited for their approval. It wasn't real, but it was honest in its effort. And that's what hurts. You offered something polished, something tailored, something safe, and they still turned away. So what now? If even your best performance isn't accepted, then what's left? That's the problem with tying your worth to someone's reaction. It makes your identity fragile. It makes you second-guess your every step. One wrong word, one cold look, and suddenly you're spiraling. Not because of them, but because you built your sense of self on sand. This is the illusion of acceptance. It feels warm and secure, but it's conditional. It often depends on you keeping up the image, the tone, the energy that others prefer. And when that energy shifts even slightly, so does the connection. It's not acceptance, it's approval masquerading as love. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." But this isn't just about family. It's about all the spaces where people bury themselves to meet expectations, where you lose your aliveness just to be accepted. And then the acceptance disappears anyway, and you're left without them and without yourself. When you perform for too long, something strange happens. You forget what your actual voice sounds like. You begin to confuse your preferences with theirs. You hesitate before speaking, not to gather your thoughts, but to edit them. You dress your truth up in softer words. You censor your instincts. And over time, that habit becomes your identity. You think, "I'm just easygoing," or "I don't mind," when in reality you've just forgotten what you do want, what you do believe, and where your lines actually are. The danger isn't just that others don't see you. It's that you stop seeing yourself. And when it ends, when someone leaves, pulls back, or stops trying, you're not just dealing with absence. You're unraveling. Because now you're asking, if this didn't work, then what would have? You wonder if maybe you should have tried harder, maybe you were too much or not enough. But those are the wrong questions, because the real pain isn't that you were rejected. It's that you were rejected while hiding. You didn't even get to find out if your real self would have been accepted, and now it's too late. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." And yet, how many of us trade self-respect for attention? How often do we call it connection when really it's performance? Real acceptance doesn't require constant effort. It doesn't punish you for slipping out of character. It doesn't vanish when you have a bad day or speak your mind or simply say no. Real acceptance makes room for you. Not just the shiny, easy parts, but the rough edges too. But here's what we miss when we're stuck in this illusion. Performing doesn't protect you from rejection. It just delays it. It stretches out the suffering, because even if they stay for a while, they're not staying with the real you. And deep down, you know it. You feel it in the anxiety that bubbles up after every interaction. In the way you replay conversations, hoping you didn't say too much. In the relief that follows when they respond and the panic when they don't. It's not love. It's fear management. And it's exhausting. Eventually, you have to ask yourself, what's worse? Being rejected for who you are, or being accepted for who you're not? One will hurt, the other will drain you. One leads to pain that heals. The other leads to a life that never quite feels like yours. When you stop performing, you risk being misunderstood. You risk losing people, but you gain clarity. You gain strength. You start to trust your own voice again. You start to breathe without waiting for someone else to tell you it's okay. The truth is, acceptance isn't something you beg for. It's something you build within. Because the only person you need to come home to is yourself. When you begin to show up as you are, not as what's acceptable, but what's true, you'll lose people. But you'll also attract the ones who never needed the performance in the first place. And those are the only ones worth keeping. The rest were only ever there for the role you played, not the person you are. Carl Jung also wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's what approval chasing does. It turns you into someone who thinks their pain is just bad luck when really it's a pattern, a habit, a script you've been living out unconsciously. And once you see that, you can choose differently. You can stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. There's no formula for guaranteed love. No behavior perfect enough to protect you from being left. But what you can control is the energy you bring into your life. You can decide to stop offering a version of yourself and start offering your actual self. Flawed, real, honest, not always agreeable, not always easy, but always true. That's not just courage, that's freedom. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, you'll never want to go back to performing again. In the end, the pain of being seen and not accepted is sharp, but it's also a gift because it strips away the mask. It shows you that you never needed to earn love through editing. You just needed to remember that you are already enough, even when you're not being applauded. The moment you stop chasing the illusion of acceptance, you start discovering the power of self-respect. And that, more than approval, more than comfort, more than temporary connection, is what builds a life that's truly yours. Pleasing others often feels like the right thing to do. It feels noble, humble, selfless. You make yourself easier to be around. You go with the flow, smooth over tension. Keep your opinions soft, your needs minimal. People smile at you. They thank you. You're appreciated for being agreeable, but the reward is shallow because deep down you sense it. You're not being celebrated for who you are. You're being tolerated for how little trouble you cause. And that's not peace. That's performance. It's not connection. It's self-erasure. The smiles you earn come at the cost of your truth. And the longer you wear that mask, the more you forget where it ends and you begin. You convince yourself that you're avoiding conflict when in fact, you're avoiding clarity. You fear that being direct might hurt someone's feelings or worse, push them away. So you hold back. You soften your tone. You reframe your truth into something less uncomfortable. But what starts as a one-time compromise quickly becomes a habit, a lifestyle. You learn to detect the slightest shifts in others' energy and adjust yourself accordingly. And with every small edit you make, you drift further from yourself. You're not being kind, you're being careful. And care that erases your inner world isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment. There's a subtle sadness that builds when your peace depends on other people's comfort. It's the kind of sadness that doesn't scream. It sighs. It shows up when you leave conversations feeling empty. Even though everyone seemed happy, it creeps in when you agree to something, then lie awake wondering why you did. You start to notice it not in big dramatic moments, but in the quiet ones, in the way you hesitate before speaking, in the way you talk yourself out of asking for what you need, in the way you smile when you're actually frustrated. Each of those moments feels small, harmless, but they add up and eventually, you become a stranger to your own voice. Peace isn't the absence of disagreement. It's the presence of truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But people-pleasing makes that impossible. You do things that aren't right for you just to avoid tension. You say things you don't fully mean just to keep things smooth. You confuse comfort with harmony. But real harmony doesn't ask you to shrink. It asks you to show up honestly with respect, not silence. It's not about shouting your truth. It's about not burying it, not diluting it until it's unrecognizable. There's a difference between being kind and being invisible. True kindness involves presence, not disappearance. It's rooted in choice, not fear. But when your actions are driven by a fear of disapproval or a fear of discomfort, they're no longer kindness. They're self-protection. And while self-protection is understandable, it becomes dangerous when it's constant because eventually you don't know what you're protecting anymore. You forget who you were before the people-pleasing began. You forget what it feels like to speak freely, to act with conviction, to stand in your own shoes without looking around for permission. And the consequences go deeper than you might think. Because the more you suppress your truth, the more resentment builds, not just toward others, but toward yourself. You begin to resent the version of you that smiles through everything. The one who always says yes, the one who puts everyone else first. You tell yourself you're easygoing, but inside there's tension, frustration, a quiet desperation to be seen, to be heard, to be allowed to be real. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." That's what people-pleasing does. It traps your important things beneath layers of politeness and compromise. It makes you lonely in a crowd. What's even more painful is that most people don't even notice. They enjoy the version of you that never disagrees, that always accommodates, that avoids tension. They appreciate your warmth, your willingness, your soft edges. But they don't see the parts of you that go unspoken. They don't know how much of yourself you've buried just to keep the relationship afloat. And when you finally reach a breaking point, when you start speaking up or pulling back, they're confused. They say you've changed, but you haven't changed. You've just stopped hiding. And that's where the tension begins. Not because you're difficult, but because you're finally being honest. That honesty can feel jarring at first. You're so used to smoothing things over that directness feels like conflict. But it's not. It's clarity. And clarity is a gift. Not just to you, but to everyone around you. Because when you speak your truth, even imperfectly, you give others permission to do the same. You create real connection. Not surface-level agreement, but mutual understanding. And that understanding doesn't always mean harmony. Sometimes it means realizing that certain relationships were built on your silence. And when that silence ends, so does the connection. That's painful. But it's not a failure. It's truth sorting itself out. The beauty of stepping away from people-pleasing is that your energy begins to return. You're no longer drained by constant monitoring, constant editing. You don't walk on eggshells. You walk on your own 2 feet. You don't second-guess every sentence. You trust your words. You speak not to be accepted, but to be clear. And that clarity, though it might lose you some smiles, gives you something far more valuable. Peace that doesn't depend on how others react. Peace that comes from living in alignment. It takes courage to let go of being liked, to risk being misunderstood. But the cost of not doing it is far greater. Because when you betray yourself to please others, you teach yourself that your needs don't matter. That your voice is secondary. That discomfort should always be avoided, even if it means denying your truth. Over time, that erodes your self-respect. You begin to look outside yourself for guidance, for value, for stability, and the world is too unstable to offer you any of those things consistently. True peace is quiet. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It's the calm that comes from knowing you showed up honestly. It's the confidence of knowing you stood by your values even if it was uncomfortable. And the people who can meet you in that space who don't need you to perform to be loved. Those are the ones who offer you something real. The rest may fall away. Let them. Not because you're better than them, but because you've simply outgrown the need to earn your place. So no, pleasing people never truly feels like peace. It might feel like relief. It might feel like approval, but it's not peace. Peace comes when your inner world stops fighting to be heard. When your actions no longer betray your heart. When you walk through your day not wondering what others think but remembering what you know. That you are enough as you are. That your truth is not a problem to be solved but a voice to be honored. And honoring that voice quietly, consistently is what allows you to come home to yourself. Not in one grand moment, but in every small decision where you choose authenticity over approval, clarity over comfort, presence over performance. That's the kind of peace that can't be taken from you because it doesn't live in other people's hands. It lives in your own. It starts so subtly. You do something nice for someone. You say what they want to hear and they smile. You feel good. You feel seen. And that feeling, it's addictive. It starts as a tool to get by, to fit in, to make others comfortable. But over time, what was once a strategy becomes a way of life. You find yourself constantly scanning the room, assessing the mood, and adapting accordingly. Every word you say, Every action you take, it's no longer driven by what you think, but by what you believe will be well received. The question shifts from "what do I believe?" to "what will they think?" You begin to mold yourself not to your values, but to the expectations of those around you. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual shift, like the slow wearing down of rock over time. You start by adjusting in small ways, just enough to keep the peace, just enough to avoid discomfort. You tell yourself it's no big deal. After all, it's just being considerate, right? But eventually, you stop noticing the shift altogether. What began as a simple desire to connect becomes an unconscious dependence. You start adjusting not just in big situations, but in every moment. You read the room before speaking, not for insight, but to predict the reactions you'll get. You find yourself saying what you think others want to hear, what you think will earn their approval, and before you know it, you're not even sure if the words you're speaking are your own. This is the moment where approval starts to become your compass. At first, it feels harmless. You're not doing anything wrong, right? You're just being polite, just being nice. But the danger lies in how your sense of self starts to erode. The more you align your actions with others' expectations, the less you align them with your own beliefs. What began as a tool for social ease becomes the very foundation of how you navigate the world. You stop asking yourself, "What is true for me?" and start asking, "What's the safest option here? What will make them comfortable?" You're still doing the right things, but for the wrong reasons. You're still being nice, but your kindness is no longer rooted in authenticity. It's rooted in fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being unseen. And this is where the danger lies. In the beginning, you might feel that you're getting closer to others. After all, you're playing the game. You're meeting people's needs, smoothing over conflicts, keeping things peaceful. But what you're really doing is becoming less and less visible to them and to yourself. Because when you start shaping your actions based on others' preferences, you stop allowing yourself the space to be fully you. Your voice becomes quieter, your needs more distant, your values less clear. You're no longer living according to your own truth. You're living according to a script you've created to ensure others approve of you. And while that script may win you temporary validation, it can never give you the depth of connection you're really seeking. When approval is your compass, you start losing that privilege. You start living someone else's version of your life. You begin to wear a mask that shifts with every social situation, and eventually, you forget what it feels like to simply be yourself. This dependency on others' approval can make you feel like you're constantly performing, constantly reacting to the world around you instead of living in alignment with your inner truth. And over time, this creates a disconnect between who you are and who you think you should be. The more you seek external validation, the more you lose touch with the one voice that truly matters, your own. It's easy to convince yourself that you're just being considerate or that you're being flexible and open-minded, but there's a subtle and often unspoken cost to this constant adaptation. It's not just your words that change. It's your entire sense of self. You begin to feel less like a person and more like a reflection of the people around you. And that, more than anything, is where the loneliness begins to creep in. It's not the physical absence of others, but the emotional and psychological absence of yourself. When you constantly tailor yourself to meet others' expectations, you lose the ability to feel grounded in who you really are. Your identity begins to be shaped by external feedback, by what others think of you, rather than by your own beliefs, values, and desires. You start to confuse approval with connection, comfort with authenticity, and safety with peace. But they're not the same thing. True peace doesn't come from avoiding discomfort or approval. It comes from standing firm in your own truth, even when it's hard. It comes from knowing who you are, regardless of who is watching or how they might react. This dependency on approval isn't just about avoiding discomfort. It's about avoiding conflict with yourself. And that avoidance slowly starts to tear you apart. It's easy to put others' needs first because it's simple, it's safe, and it feels good in the moment. But in the long run, it drains your energy and your sense of self. When you put others' expectations before your own truths, you're slowly giving away your power piece by piece. And eventually, you might find yourself asking, who am I really underneath all these adaptations? What do I truly believe without the need for someone else to approve it? The truth is, approval seeking never leads to the peace we crave. It leads to a life of constant negotiation between who you are and who you think you should be. The peace you're after, the true sense of connection, comes from being real with yourself first and foremost. It comes from letting go of the need to be accepted by everyone and instead focusing on the importance of accepting yourself. You don't need others' approval to feel worthy. You don't need to mold yourself into what others want in order to belong. The only belonging that matters is belonging to yourself. The only approval that matters is yours. And here's the thing. When you start to live authentically, when you stop tailoring your actions to others' expectations, something shifts. It's not easy at first. It feels uncomfortable, even risky. But eventually, you begin to feel the weight lifting. You stop feeling like you're constantly performing. You stop feeling like you're walking on eggshells. You stop feeling the need to check others' faces for validation. And in that freedom, you discover something remarkable. Not the peace of avoiding conflict, but the peace of standing in your truth, unwavering no matter what others may think. This doesn't mean you'll stop seeking connection. It doesn't mean you'll stop wanting to be loved, accepted, or understood. It simply means that your worth won't hinge on whether or not you get those things. Because the truth is, when you stop seeking approval, you stop living for others' validation. You start living for yourself. And that's the kind of life that feels real. It's the kind of life that brings genuine peace. Not the temporary relief of others' smiles, but the lasting satisfaction of being fully and unapologetically you. What we often fail to realize is that approval is a crutch. It's an illusion of safety. You may get the approval you're seeking, but at what cost? You lose the essence of who you are in the process. The only true path to peace, to authentic connection, is to let go of that crutch. Let go of the constant need to mold yourself for others. Stand firm in your own voice, even when it's uncomfortable. In the end, it's not approval that will fulfill you. It's self-acceptance. And that's where true peace lies. Epictetus once spoke of the subtle slavery that comes with the need for approval. Not the kind of slavery where chains bind you, but the kind where your own habits start to confine you. It's the way you adjust your tone to avoid offending someone even when you're not being true to what you feel. It's the way you edit your posts, crafting them to appear more polished, more insightful, as if your raw truth isn't good enough to be shared. It's the way you smile through discomfort, nod through disagreement, and bite your tongue when you really want to speak up just to keep the peace. These actions may seem harmless, even polite, but they come at a cost. They are the chains of self-censorship, the chains that don't show on the outside, but weigh heavily on the inside. This slavery isn't about someone else holding the chains. It's about how you hold them yourself. Every time you compromise your truth to gain approval, you're tightening the grip on your own freedom. The world doesn't need to control you with force. It simply teaches you to control yourself for its comfort. It teaches you to be agreeable, to fit in, to mold your behavior to avoid discomfort or conflict. And over time, you begin to forget what it feels like to act without this self-imposed restraint. You start to believe that your worth is tied to how others perceive you, that your voice is only valuable when it is palatable to the masses. What's most insidious about this form of slavery is how natural it feels. You tell yourself you're just being thoughtful or considerate or kind. You justify these small compromises, telling yourself it's no big deal. After all, you don't want to upset anyone. You don't want to cause any tension. But in truth, every time you suppress your true self, you lose a little bit of your own sense of self. It's as if you are editing your essence, trimming away pieces of who you really are to make yourself more acceptable. It's as though you're constantly putting on a mask, one that fits the situation but hides the face beneath it. And eventually, you don't know who you are anymore without the mask. But how can you become who you truly are when you're so busy conforming to the expectations around you? The truth is, in trying so hard to be liked, to be accepted, to be seen as good, you lose the very thing that would make you valuable in the first place, your authentic self. And as the years go by, as you continue to mold yourself for others, the person you once knew so well, the person you were before the masks and compromises, begins to fade. The original you becomes buried under layers of social conformity, buried under the pressure of what everyone else expects of you. We've all been there, haven't we? The moments when you check your social media post a dozen times, tweaking your words just to make sure it will be received well. You adjust your language, soften your opinions, add a smile to your tone just to make sure no one feels offended. You smile when you'd rather frown, nod when you'd rather speak out, and agree when you know you should disagree. And all of this is for the sake of what? Approval. Acceptance. The truth is, approval never fills you up the way you think it will. It's a quick fix, like sugar. It satisfies in the moment, but it leaves you craving more. You get the likes, the compliments, the validation, but when the applause fades, you're left wondering who you really are. This type of slavery to likability feeds off your insecurity. It thrives on your fear of rejection, fear of being cast aside, fear of standing alone. But here's the truth. When you bend yourself constantly to fit others' expectations, you're not growing. You're shrinking. You're shrinking the real you, the one with unique thoughts, bold ideas, and a strong sense of self. And without even realizing it, you become trapped in a cycle of self-editing, self-censorship, and self-doubt. Every compromise, every small adjustment is a brick in the wall you're building around your true self. As the philosopher Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." The same can be said for those who seek constant approval. They risk losing themselves in the process. When you're constantly adjusting who you are to gain the approval of others, you start to lose sight of what truly matters to you. You become so focused on keeping everyone happy that you forget to ask yourself what you want. You lose touch with your own desires, your own goals, your own values. And in doing so, you become a stranger to yourself. The real freedom comes when you let go of the need to be liked. When you stop measuring your worth by the number of approvals you collect. True freedom comes from standing firm in your own truth even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges the status quo. It comes from saying, "This is who I am," and not apologizing for it. It's about accepting the reality that not everyone will like you. Not everyone will agree with you. And that's okay. It's not about being rude or dismissive. It's about being real. The world doesn't need more people who are afraid to speak up, who are afraid to say what they believe, who are afraid to stand firm in their values. What the world needs is more people who are willing to be themselves, no matter what. The more you chase approval, the less you'll find peace. Peace comes from being authentic, from knowing you're living in alignment with your true values, not based on what others expect or demand from you. It comes from being grounded in who you are, regardless of what others think. The moment you stop performing for others' approval is the moment you start to feel truly free. You stop dancing to someone else's tune and start creating your own rhythm. You start making decisions based on your values, your truths, and your desires, not based on fear of rejection or the need to please others. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. Letting go of the need for approval is no small task. It takes courage. It takes strength. But over time, it becomes easier. You start to notice the weight lifting off your shoulders. You start to notice that the more authentic you are, the more you attract the people who truly appreciate you for who you are. Not for the mask you wear, not for the performance you put on, but for the real you, the person beneath the layers of edits and adjustments. And those are the people who matter. They're the ones who see you, not for your approval ratings, but for your essence. So the next time you feel the pull to change your voice, to hide your opinion, or to soften your words just to fit in, remember that you don't need to seek approval to feel worthy. The only approval you need is your own. And when you learn to approve of yourself, when you embrace your truth, your unique voice, and your values, you unlock the greatest freedom you'll ever experience. The freedom to be yourself. And in that freedom, you'll discover the most genuine peace of all. Approval seeking often feels like a safety net. It provides a sense of validation that can temporarily fill the emptiness. It gives us the illusion that we are doing things right, that we are being accepted. But that feeling is always fleeting. The approval we seek is conditional. It depends on the whims of others, their moods, their judgments, and their biases. And because it's external, it's always at risk of disappearing. But true peace and contentment come from within. The peace you're looking for isn't found in the applause of others. It's found in your ability to stand by yourself, to validate your own worth regardless of outside opinions. It's in the confidence of knowing that your truth is your own and doesn't need anyone's approval to be valuable. At some point in our lives, we all have to face a hard truth. The world doesn't revolve around our performance. We're not here to impress others or to fit into their expectations. Life isn't a stage where we play roles just to gain favor. The more we try to please others, the more we lose touch with the essence of who we are. We lose our authenticity in exchange for an image, a version of ourselves that's shaped not by our true desires but by the desires of others. But here's the powerful realization. Once you let go of the need for approval, you're free to rediscover yourself. You can finally live for yourself, not for the approval of anyone else. This shift may feel uncomfortable at first, and that's okay. We've all been conditioned to seek approval in one form or another. But as you begin to unlearn this habit, you'll start to realize something truly liberating. You are enough as you are. You don't have to perform or adjust your thoughts and actions to fit into someone else's version of reality. True freedom comes when you stop worrying about what others think and start focusing on what aligns with your own values. You see, approval is a crutch, and it's one that keeps you from standing tall in your own truth. Every time you seek validation from others, you give away a little piece of your power. The more you seek approval, the less you trust yourself, and the more dependent you become on external factors for your sense of worth. But when you stop performing, you return to a state of self-sufficiency. You no longer need to shape yourself to fit someone else's narrative. You start living authentically and, in turn, you begin to attract the people who value you for who you truly are. This doesn't mean you will never experience rejection or criticism. The truth is you will. But you'll be strong enough to handle it. Rejection will no longer define you. It will simply become another experience, another lesson, another part of your journey. And more importantly, you'll know that your worth is not contingent on the approval of others. It is solid, stable, and rooted within you. Living authentically also means accepting that not everyone will understand you. You won't always fit into other people's expectations, and that's okay. The people who are meant to be in your life will respect your boundaries, your values, and your truth. They won't need you to perform or to bend to their will. They'll appreciate you for the real you, the version of you that stands firm in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable or unpopular. As you start walking this path, you may encounter resistance. Others may not like the changes they see in you. They may feel threatened by your refusal to please them. But that's not your responsibility. Their discomfort is theirs to process. Your responsibility is to stay true to yourself, to honor your needs, and to live with integrity. And the more you do this, the more you'll find that your energy returns. You'll no longer feel drained by the constant need to conform or perform. You'll find peace in simply being. Real respect isn't earned through conformity, it's earned through authenticity. It's the respect that comes not because you fit into someone else's mold, but because you stand in your truth, grounded in your own principles. It's the respect that comes when you live in alignment with your values, even when others disagree with you. And while it may take time for others to recognize this respect, when they do, it will be deep, real, and unshakable. And the beauty of it is, as you start to live authentically and let go of the need for approval, the relationships that remain will be those that are built on mutual respect and understanding. These are the relationships that truly matter, where both parties can show up as their real selves, without masks or pretense. The rest, the ones that are based on performance or people-pleasing, will naturally fall away. But that's okay, because in their place, you will have something far more valuable, relationships that are grounded in truth, authenticity, and respect. So, the next time you feel the urge to shrink, to soften your voice, or to adjust your actions just to fit into someone else's world, pause and ask yourself, what am I trading for this approval? And is it worth it? Because when you stop seeking approval, you start discovering the power that lies in simply being yourself. That is where true peace, true freedom, and true fulfillment reside. And once you've experienced that, no amount of approval can ever replace the freedom of living in your truth. And remember, the only approval you truly need is your own. The rest will follow naturally when you start living authentically, with integrity, and from a place of self-respect. So, stop performing. Start becoming. Live in alignment with your true values, and the rest of the world will catch up. The moment you stop performing, something remarkable happens. You start to become the person you were always meant to be. The noise of other people's expectations fades away, and you become attuned to your own inner voice. This shift isn't just about shedding a mask, it's about reclaiming the core of who you are. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth or justify your existence. You walk into rooms not with the burden of keeping up an image, but with the freedom of just being you. In this space of authenticity, there's no need for constant approval or applause. You speak your truth with clarity, act from a place of conviction, and make choices based on your values. It's not about being liked by everyone, it's about being true to yourself. And when you do this, something powerful occurs. You start to align with others who respect your boundaries, your integrity, and your authenticity. These people may not always agree with you, but they will respect you. And that respect is far more meaningful than the fleeting approval you once sought. As you let go of the need for validation, your life begins to take shape in ways you never imagined. You stop compromising your beliefs for the sake of harmony. You stop second-guessing yourself because you trust your own judgment. The constant fear of rejection and disapproval no longer weighs you down. Instead, you find the courage to walk confidently in your own truth. And in this confidence, you discover a profound peace. The peace that comes from standing in your truth is the kind that cannot be shaken. It is rooted deeply in your sense of self-worth, which no longer depends on external sources. You begin to make decisions that are aligned with your values, not because you need to be accepted, but because they reflect who you truly are. This inner alignment brings a deep sense of fulfillment that no amount of external validation could ever offer. But it's important to acknowledge that living authentically doesn't always come easy. It requires a willingness to face discomfort, to challenge the norms, and to risk being misunderstood. You will face criticism, judgment, and perhaps even rejection. But with each step you take towards living authentically, you grow stronger. You begin to realize that rejection is not a reflection of your worth. It's simply a part of the process. It's a signal that you're moving away from the need for external validation and toward a life that's grounded in your own truth. In the face of rejection, remember this: you are enough as you are. Your worth is not tied to how others perceive you, and you do not need to shrink or change to fit into someone else's version of reality. The more you embrace your authenticity, the more you attract people who value you for who you truly are. These are the relationships that bring real depth and meaning to your life. And as you continue to live authentically, you will begin to notice how much energy you have reclaimed. You'll no longer feel drained by the need to please or conform. Instead, you'll feel empowered by the simple act of being yourself. The world becomes lighter when you stop carrying the weight of others' expectations, and you begin to walk freely, confidently, and with purpose. The beauty of this journey is that it is uniquely yours. There is no one-size-fits-all formula for authenticity. It's about tuning into your own voice, making decisions that align with your values, and embracing the discomfort that comes with stepping away from the need for approval. This is where true freedom lies, in knowing that you can trust yourself, that your actions are in alignment with your values, and that you no longer need to seek validation from others. As you continue on this path, you'll begin to realize that the approval you once sought was never what you truly needed. What you were really seeking was peace. And that peace comes from within, from standing firm in your truth, and from living in alignment with your values. It is in this alignment that you find the greatest sense of fulfillment and joy. So, the next time you feel tempted to perform, to adjust yourself to fit into someone else's world, pause and remember this: your truth is enough. You don't need anyone's approval to be worthy. You are enough as you are. Live in alignment with your values, honor your truth, and let go of the need to please. In doing so, you'll discover a sense of freedom, peace, and self-respect that no approval-seeking behavior could ever provide. And as you continue this journey, remember that you don't need anyone's permission to live your truth. You don't need to shrink, hide, or adjust to fit in. You are enough as you are, and when you embrace that, you step into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. It's in this authenticity that you'll find the peace and fulfillment you've been searching for all along.